take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Welcome to Life in Red.
All right, coming to you live from the closet in bedroom studios. My good friend Jesse Camacho. Thanks for joining me, man. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's gonna be fun.
I always love checking out people's the backgrounds of everyone's like makeshift studios in this new world of Zoom calls.
Yes.
I was in my living room for a while, and then now I'm switched back into the bedroom. I'm digging I know people can't really see it, but the hunting jackets and
yes,
the cloths.
There's exactly, some tablecloths, some extra sheets, and some towels. This is I'm lucky that there's a decent sized closet in the room. I'm staying with my parents in Montreal right now.
All right.
And they're working a bit out there, so this is the room I get that you can't hear anything.
Right.
But yeah, surrounded by classic closet stuff.
Have you been staying with them like during this like pandemic type situation?
Yeah, so basically, obviously, this really started to hit home of Canada and this side of the world. I guess it was around early March. I feel like was when people really started kind of turning their heads towards it here, and around then I was like, as an actor, everything kind of shut down, so there wasn't a ton of opportunity for work. So I said, maybe I'll come home for a bit, and I kind of hemmed and hawed it until the end of March, early April, and then I came back, and I've been here ever since, and starting to eye my return to Toronto. I guess it'll depend on a bunch of things.
Yeah, I saw the Writers Guild. I think it was last week actually. They put out a tweet saying that they're opening back up and providing guidelines and stuff for getting back to work for the actors and everything like that. Do you have any upcoming like projects that you were kind of like that got put on hold before you were able to get going on them, or things lined up?
Yeah, I'm super lucky that I'm a part of this really fun Netflix show called Locke Key, and that we would have been shooting season 2, I believe, around now. I'm not exactly sure about that, but that was kind of the rumor I'd heard back early in the year, I think in like February. So that's obviously been put on some kind of indefinite hold. Again, that's all way above my pay grade, but I would assume that we'll be delayed until it's safe to go back. And I keep saying this: if the worst thing that happens to me during COVID-19 is the show that I'm lucky enough to be on is delayed a little bit, I'll take it. It's hardly the worst thing that's ever happened. So, it's I'm happy I've got something to go back to when the time's ready, and willing to wait however long that needs to be.
Right. And definitely going to get to Locke and Key and some of your other work. I was interested just to kind of get like a little bit of your backstory and how you fell into it. You've been acting for quite a while. I mean, I see some early credits as 2008, and you start in Less Than Kind as a younger person. Is acting something like you just always wanted to do? And how did you get started in it at such a young age?
Yeah, I'm a pretty interesting case. Actually, it's really in the blood. Both my parents are actors.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of came out of the womb wanting to do it, and growing up, seeing my parents on television, going to visit them on sets. But it was weird. It did sort of happen organically. Like they were definitely not pressuring me to follow in that path, because there's just a lot of rejection, and there's it's very feast or famine. And while my parents were lucky enough and talented enough that they maintained a somewhat consistent living, it's not the case a lot of the time. But I mean, I started begging since I was 5 years old, and then when I was 8, they were like, "All right, let's give this a shot." And so I kind of fell into it at 8, and then once I was into it, they were extremely supportive. And then my sister as well, my younger sister Sarah, also she fought it a lot longer than I did, but after high school, she was like, "No, this is what I want to do as well." So she's an actress as well. So yeah,
Wow.
it's kind of a family affair.
So your first show, that's not the one. There we go. When you started, you must have been only 14, 15 years old when you were starring in that show. So I guess you could say sort of like that childhood actor. What was that process like, and juggling, regular high school stuff, dating and homework and growing up with hormones and like trying
Well,
to balance
unfortunately
with
for me,
this.
unfortunately for me, dating was never too much of an issue. There wasn't too much going on, so it wasn't too hard to balance it. But no, I obviously, I was fortunate enough, not on a consistent level or anything, to work kind of off and on through, when I was, as I said, 8 or 9. So by the time I booked Less Than Kind, that was, I think I was in my senior year of high school, which in Quebec is grade 11. So I think I was a little older than 14. I think I was 16 or 17. But it was definitely the biggest job I'd ever had in terms of sort of being the focal point of that show. I mean, it grew into this amazing ensemble, but especially at the beginning, Sheldon, my character, was sort of the entry point for the audience. And it was intimidating. It was scary, but it was so exciting. And with me in school, because that is a really great, fair question. They're great on sets. They've got tutors for you. They keep you apprised of everything. But I sort of had that, looking back on it, probably wasn't a great attitude of, school was so secondary for me because I knew what I wanted to do, and I kind of knew what I needed to know in order to pursue that, which is really a kind of a silly thing to be, because you're not always going to be acting, and you might need other jobs. And I've had to do that. So I should have been better in school. I was fine. I was okay. But it just wasn't a priority for me. It was all about when I was working, I would go and sit with my tutor and do the work necessary and learn what I needed to learn. But my head was always on set and what the next script was going to be, what the next scene was going to be. So I did balance it, but it was, it was definitely skewed in the direction of wanting to work. And I just love being on sets and performing and stuff, and being part of an ensemble. It's really where I kind of shine. So it was tricky, but again, I would find it trickier today because I would put much more emphasis on my schooling than I did at the time.
Right. I'm interested, there's the kind of, not the word, stereotype's not the word, but it's for us as public and an audience, people who enter into sort of acting or music at a young age. They sometimes they fall off the wagon or they, have problems later down the road. Mm-hmm. Was there like, I don't know, did it change you? Was there like sort of like different kinds of pressures that like were hard to deal with or certain things that were coming up that, it was hard to separate kind of like trying to be a normal human and mm-hmm. being on TV?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it was made easier for me because I had my parents that knew the highs and lows of the industry, and in a very encouraging and gentle way, we're always saying like, yeah, you've got this show now and you're the lead of the show, but that show gets canceled tomorrow. We're all back to square one. Like, it's not, especially at the time, it's gotten better in Canada now. There isn't really a star system. There wasn't really at the time. So you could be the lead of a show, and then a week later you're auditioning for one line in a low budget movie. It's not like that anymore, but that, 12, 13 years ago, that was certainly kind of the case. So, I was lucky to keep my parents, again, in a gentle way, kind of kept me humble and, keep your feet on the ground. And not only that, I think in a weird way, being a big kid, I was always an overweight kid. I was always kind of an anxiety-ridden kid. Sort of because of my self-deprecation almost kept me grounded too. It's like, yeah, you're the lead of the show. Yeah, you've got this going for you, but you're still the chubby kid. You're not the athletic kid, so it kind of weird, in a weird way, kind of balanced itself out.
Right.
Which is kind of bizarre. So it was never too much of an issue for me.
Do you think, like you said, that you've always been kind of like overweight or cast in a certain shadow. Do you find it, when you're going to auditions, do you find it harder to maybe break out of being typecasted or kind of put into a certain box because of the way you look? You don't, you think of any show you see, you never really see like certain groups of people as the lead character and
oh yeah,
the envy of everybody, right? They're the silly person, comic relief, like they always kind of get mm-hmm. tossed to the side. Have you, in your experience and with you and other people, has that been a challenge for you with trying to find work?
Yeah, it's really kind of, again, it is a bit of a double-edged sword in a way, because, I've got, because, it is a community in a way, performers. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of friends that are, beautiful, handsome, like really leading man and women type. Um, and they audition far more than I do. But when they audition, there's 1,000 people going up against them that all kind of look exactly like them. Whereas when I go in, maybe about a third or a fourth as much as they do, but it's me and 3 other guys. So it's like, there is that kind of dichotomy in terms of, my own insecurities and aspirations. Yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of a lot of young adult shows growing up. That shows that it's like, oh well, I'll never be on that show. But I mean, too, I have to own some responsibility for that. That was also there was laziness on my part. I'm a lazy guy by nature. Well, if it's not on a set, I'm pretty lazy. So it's like I wasn't always helping myself. It's like who knows, if I worked hard enough, maybe I could. So but there's a thing too. I don't know if you want to be encouraging that you have to be beautiful to be the lead of something, but at the same time, I wasn't exactly helping myself. So I feel like there's a really healthy ground. And that's why Less Than Kind was such an amazing opportunity for me, because it was someone like me who was overweight and not, traditionally good looking, or however you want to call it, being the focal point of the show. And I think we're seeing that more and more these days, is these different voices and perspectives. I think it's great what's going on with diversity in film is amazing, that we're getting to see people that we wouldn't expect or cast in certain roles being brought in for stuff. So yeah, it's definitely a thing. Like I do want to read for the good-looking doctor or the, the rugged bad boy. But it's, at the same time, you have to make peace with what you're good at and who you are. And I'm still fighting that a little bit, but it's getting better. I'm just really grateful for the career I've had. But yeah, of course, there are times where I wish that I could be the heartthrob.
Well, I think you're quite handsome. So
thank you very
that's
much.
just coming from me.
Thank you.
Was there particular actors that maybe you looked up to when you were younger, or just getting started in the industry, where you're like, I want to be, like Belushi or like John Candy or someone else? Were there people that really stood out for you?
Well, you definitely just named 2 of them. I mean, 100%. John Candy especially is someone that I've really always admired. And, people say that I look like him, and that to me, I know I was just talking about traditional, everything like that. When people tell me I look like John Candy, to me, that's like the ultimate compliment. Those guys, even like somebody like Chris Farley, I was a big fan of Chris Farley. But yeah, there's many. I mean, I'm, biologically contracted to say my parents, but they really were. That's actually true. My father, obviously, maybe a little bit more, because he's also a male actor. I'm much more overweight than he ever was, but he's also, we call it, character actor, where you're that guy. Oh, I've seen you in 10,000 things. My dad's very much that. My mom's always been more of a theater performer, and she's incredible. But for me, it's the John C. Reillys, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Paul Giamatti. My dad actually and Paul Giamatti look very similar. So yeah, really those kind of guys that have had this kind of consistent career. They're not usually the lead, but they got really nice, meaty supporting roles. And yeah, they can kind of fit into any mold within their physical limit, or whatever you want to call it.
Right. Yeah. I love Paul Giamatti and seeing him play all sorts of different roles from Adams to, Straight Outta Compton, right? Like,
right.
So versatile, and you just recognize him as a great actor.
Yeah.
So tell me about this project now. It just came out, I guess, before COVID, Locke Key. What's that show about, and how'd you get involved with it? Obviously audition, but.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it kind of came around that way. It's actually a project with a really kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, because it's not negative, but it's had a turbulent history in terms of television adaptation.
Okay.
It's based on these graphic novels by this incredible author, Joe Hill, who's this amazing storyteller and horror writer. He also happens to be Stephen King's son. But he, just on his own is just incredible. If I could have 1% of his brain, I would be very lucky. And it was illustrated by this really talented artist, Gabriel Rodriguez. And it's basically the story of this family that after the tragic death of the father in the family, they moved to his childhood home, which they realize is kind of haunted by these magical keys that all have these different abilities. And they kind of start playing around with them and having fun with them, and then realize there's this malignant power in the house, this evil thing that's also trying to get the keys. And it's sort of about that battle And I'm, one of the lead girl's friends at school. She's part of this club called the Savini Squad, and we're big horror nerds, and we kind of get wrapped up in this whole thing. And it's a lot of fun. It's very much in the Stranger Things meets, Harry Potter, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe with like a splash of Riverdale in there. So it's a really fun show, and it's been really an honor to be a part of.
Yeah, it's interesting that it didn't get the push like showing up on trending and everything that got pushed up. What's the reception been like from people that you heard watching it, whether it be social media, in the traditional media, fans? Has it been quite positive?
Yeah, it's been, it's been also, the stuff that people are tagging me in and giving me love are usually very, very positive. So from what I've seen, it's been very positive. I think people have really kind of embraced it. I think Netflix has a lot of faith in the show, which is great. So yeah, I mean, it's been really, really wonderful. I try not to, obsess too much over that kind of thing, but from what, and I keep in touch with the cast, but it's been pretty overwhelming, from our side of it. So again, thanking my lucky stars all the time.
Mm-hmm. Has there been other things that you've been working on in the past little bit? I was looking through your IMDb credits, and I'll give a shout out to Peter who connected us, because he also connected me with a few other people, Kevin Johnson from Ozark and Chris Renoni. And I made the mistake of, I've never really, this starting to get in the foray of interviewing actors, and I was like, oh, I've seen you. I saw on IMDb you were in this and this, and they're like, oh yeah, that was like 2 seconds, and like I didn't even know I was in it until someone texted me. So I'm kind of like learning the world of
IMDb is usually pretty reliable.
Yeah, so so I don't want to make the mistake of like, oh, I saw you in this, but you're like, oh yeah, that was like 5 seconds of me, and I didn't know I was in it. Has there been stuff you've been working on that have been out in current projects? I know, whether through Zoom or anything like that.
I mean, obviously, in the last little while, it's been pretty dead. But I had a web series recently come out that was really fun, called Night Owl, which was kind of about the graveyard shift at a local grocery store, which we shot, a couple of years ago, and just through whatever, post production and festival runs, it's just coming out now, which is in a weird way been very topical, because grocery stores have been, the kind of the one thing that was open. So while we didn't shoot the show with that in mind at all, there's a really kind of weird poetry to it now. So that was great. I did a fun little, well, it's a pretty dark movie, but it was really fun to work on, an independent film in Montreal called We're Still Together, that I'm really, really proud of. Yeah, I mean, again, I've been super lucky, but in terms of like, the big things that I've been working on, I did a movie a year and a half ago called Good Sam, which is also on Netflix. That's a really nice kind of feel good movie, romantic, kind of a mystery story, but a positive one. So yeah, there's been some stuff here and there, and it's kept me afloat. And again, I'm super lucky. Mm-hmm. But yeah, those are the kind of the bigger things that have happened recently.
Is there a difference when you're filming a network show or filming a Netflix show, filming a web series? Like, is there a lot of differences when it goes into your preparation for the character, learning lines, like how the outline of the show? Like, is there a big difference in kind of like the different places the show's going to end up in terms of getting it ready?
Do you mean from a performance standpoint, or from like okay, yeah. Well, it's funny. I've thought about this, and when I was on Less Than Kind, again, I was, especially at the beginning, very much the focal point of the show. My character was sort of the lead of the show, and again, it became more of an ensemble as it went. So the preparation for that and for something like Locke Key is different in a bizarre way, because on Locke Key, my character's much more kind of on the peripheral. I'm more of a supporting character. I kind of come in, I get to do really fun stuff, and then I get to kind of leave. And I remember going into Locke Key, my mindset going into it was different than Less Than Kind, because Less Than Kind, I said, I'm really a part of the squad. Like, I need to, really get in with the writers, ingratiate, the other cast members. We've got to be a family. And when, guest stars come in, I really want to welcome them to the set. Whereas on Locke Key, I was like, I just don't want to slow them down. I want to come in. I want to know my lines. They're a well-oiled machine at this point. I want to come in, and I don't want to be like, oh, who's this new guy that's like slowing everything down. Whereas I knew Less Than Kind, I was like, I have time to develop these relationships, and what's his quirks, what's my quirks, how does she work, how do they work, all that stuff. But what ended up happening with Locke and Key was they were so incredibly welcoming to me and so kind and, open to everything that I ended up leaving that first day almost as if I had on Less Than Kind. I was like, oh my God, they've made me feel like part of the family. So it ended up being the same. But there is a difference usually, like when you come in as a guest star or recurring or more supporting, which is, it's not necessarily about you. So it's like, go in, play your part, try to put as much of you as you can into it, but don't slow the process down. And again, Less Than Kind, where I really felt it's like, oh, there's so much of me in this show that you feel like you've got a little more time to kind of figure out how you want to do things and how you can all work together. So it's almost like you're setting the pace instead of jumping on the moving train.
Right. I'm also curious, like take us a little bit through the process of, whether it's your own process or things you've heard or picked up from other actors of getting a character ready. And when you're ready to finally start like filming and getting that on camera, what goes into that? Because that's something I've always been fascinated about. Like, how do they learn their lines and how do they decipher different elements of this character's personality? What's a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it changes from project to project, but I can definitely give you some examples. I mean, what I try to do always is I try to put as much as myself into it as I can. I try to find whatever I have in common with the character, and I try to access that side of me. Like for Less Than Kind, the character's name was Sheldon. Sheldon was much smarter than I am. He's much more book smart than me, but I felt we had similar morals, we had similar principles, and I felt like I'm always the voice of reason in my friend group. Sheldon was the voice of reason. So I was like, okay, I'm going to bring my, not to honk my own horn, I guess, but level-headedness to this. Like it's very much me as a problem solver, as a diffuser, that kind of thing. Locke and Key, I'm a film nerd and this guy's a film nerd. They're young filmmakers. I love doing that kind of thing. I love making film. And the preparation for Less Than Kind by the end really was just memorizing the lines because you put the costume on, you're with your cast members and you go like, okay, yes, you kind of developed two instincts, your instinct and your character's instinct. And Less Than Kind, I was very lucky that they were so closely aligned. Locke and Key was pretty similar as well. What would really help me with Locke and Key was, as I said, we're a squad, we're the Savini squad in the show, getting to set and just sitting with the other actors in the squad, Patrice, Asha, Amelia, and Griffin, and kind of just chatting, just joking around with us. It's like, okay, there's our rhythm, there's our rapport, and it just kind of bleeds in, and the memorization kind of comes easier because we kind of know each other so well. But there's been trickier ones too. I mentioned a project a little while ago called We're Still Together that I did, which is my character's very, very bullied, and he's been kicked out of his house, and he's wandering the streets of Montreal kind of really depressed. And, as I've said, I'm someone who's suffered pretty significantly from anxiety and I guess depression as an extension of that, I mean. And that one, I would go to set, and it was so weird. I'd listen to the Annie soundtrack and like the depressing songs, like the song Maybe, and I'd listen to that over and over again and kind of really, bring my energy level down and get to that kind of darker place. And then once I got there, I would be able to have some fun on the set because it's like I brought myself, I can key into it. But before I got there, I had to get myself to that place. So it changes. Sorry, this is a long-winded answer, but it changes project to project.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you don't mind talking about the anxiety, because I know it's a touchy subject. Now, I myself, I'm a mental health advocate and speaker, and I talk a lot about my own story with depression and anxiety, and a lot of topics with previous episodes have been on mental health as well. So I'm curious, how do you go about managing your your anxiety and other mental health things that come up? Do you exercise, practice mindfulness, all those different types of things that people talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I don't always do it very well. That's the thing, is I've had, my anxiety seems to come in these like long spurts. Like I'll get it for like really bad anxiety for like 6 months where I obsess over something, and for me, my anxiety is always about losing control. I'm a very control person. I've had not to freak any of the listeners out, but I've had, I don't know if you know, derealization, depersonalization,
Yeah.
where you feel like you're not in control of your body, or the world feels foreign. And it's a really kind of terrifying feeling. And, I've had to work during those periods and stuff. And I did extensive therapy. I did CBT. I did stuff like that. And, sometimes it really helps me. Sometimes it doesn't. But what I've always kind of thought to myself is, every single time you get bad anxiety, it feels insurmountable, and then you get better, and then it goes away. Maybe not forever. It'll come back, but you always will have that return to normal. You're like, wow, I feel completely normal again. And I know some people don't experience that. I'm just speaking for myself, that I always do kind of emerge from the other side eventually. Whether that's, my mind eventually goes, okay, well, you've been this scared for 6 months and nothing worse has happened. So your mind kind of just gets used to it. So it's almost self-imposed exposure therapy, or your mind finally starts thinking about other things and you kind of forget about it. I think we do have more control than we think. Obviously there are cases where people, or whether they're on medication or, they're in therapy ongoing, and, it's not a simple fix for everyone, but I kind of have learned a bit my patterns. But I say that, and then next month I'll develop a new thing, and I'll be like, no, that's it. I'm screwed forever. I don't always balance it well, and there isn't a hard fix yet. But as it is, knowing my pattern has been helpful for me.
Yeah, no, I can speak to that as well. One of the big things I do is I create these like scenarios, and then I create this like self-fulfilling prophecy in my head of picking up all these things that are going on around me and just adding it to this like false narrative, and then build it all up until eventually I just go like, I can't deal with this anymore and I have to deal with it. So I'm curious though, for a lot of us who, I work in radio, but I work in an office and well, not right now, but the point is people have an option sometimes to sit back or maybe kind of take a day where you don't put a maximum effort in. For you, sometimes you don't get that luxury with the work you do. So how do you manage the two where you're expected to be on, but you're also, have those anxious feelings and things going on in your personal life, and they're obviously intertwined. So how do you kind of get around that to give your best work?
Yeah, well, it's weird. You kind of hit the nail on the head. For me, I don't do well with downtime. When I'm not working, which as an actor is usually the case, I sit and I get in my head and I'll start thinking about something. Like, I'm going to sound crazy, but as an example, I'll reach for something. I'm like, oh, wait, that's weird. I just automatically reach for something when I wanted it. Is that my hand? Am I control? And then everything I do is like thinking about it, until I've worked myself up into this frenzy that when you really stop and think about it, it's like, why are you so obsessed about that? Like, it doesn't make, you just go about your day. And I can't, like, I obsess about it. And then it feeds into losing control. Like, I'm a bad flyer. I don't like getting on planes. I'm always worried about losing my mind, losing control of my body, or whatever it is. So for me, when I do get work, I will really look forward to it, because when I'm on set, you're thinking about 1,000 different things and you're going about it. But there have been times, of course, where I've worked myself up so much that you have trouble concentrating. And I pride myself that I've always been able to kind of, put on a face and deliver. But it's not always easy. But for me, it's the busier, the better, because eventually when you've got so much to think about, this is fun. Sometimes I've been so obsessed about something, it's all I can think about in a negative way. Like, I wake up, I'm thinking about it. I go to bed thinking about it. And I'll be doing something and somebody will ask me to do something and I'll forget about it for like even 30 seconds. I'll, like, help me pick this up. And I'll go, wait a minute. For that 30 seconds, I was okay. I didn't even think about my anxiety. I was normal again. If I can do that, I can make that the new normal. So yeah, I don't really know if I'm answering your question, but it's, for me, it's the busier, the better. The more you can get your mind off things, the better. It's a bit of avoidance sometimes, which I'm not sure serves me in the long run. But that's why, it's a learning curve. I'm still, like, as I go, I'm kind of learning. I have a horrible phobia of outer space. If I think about outer space too much, I freak out. Yeah. It's another control thing, that you're just on this planet in the middle of this vast thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm an odd duck, but I wear my quirks. I don't embarrass. I'm always willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely haven't perfected it, but I feel like I've gotten better.
Yeah, that's interesting in the space because I remember I had an astrophysicist on and we were talking about it. And I was like, do you ever get that existential dread? You know, that you're studying galaxies and these things like happening way out and learning all about the universe, and like that must just be like very profound. And she said it actually makes me appreciate being on Earth more and like
Yeah.
living my life, because even though everything does seem insignificant in a way when you look at it like that, it just makes me living my life the way I want to like that much more special. And it kind of gave it like a little bit different perspective on that. But I can see where you're going with it for sure when it comes to the anxiety.
Yeah, it's not fun, but you know, I always say if I could go back and change it, I'm not sure I would, because I think going through those things is actually helpful in the long run. It's not fun, and sometimes you feel like you lost time in your life being so enveloped in something that when you look at it on paper seems silly, but you know, I think every experience enriches you in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting back to a little bit more of the acting, is there a certain genre that you kind of like to gravitate towards to more? I could imagine, you know, as an audience member, that even though horror scares me, like I think that would be pretty fun to shoot, you know, with all the blood and gore and all those different things, as opposed to comedy, which would seem much more like regular day life. Is there something that like you kind of find yourself gravitating towards a little bit more in terms of not the final product, but the actual process of getting
shooting
it shot and doing it?
Yeah, I mean, it's so ingrained in me. There is an answer to this, but it's so ingrained in me as an actor that, you know, beggars can't be choosers. Anything I get, I'm thrilled with. But you know, in terms of like the funnest stuff for me, you know, growing up, I was a huge fan of shows like Lost and as I said, you know, Stranger Things is pretty new, but Stranger Things. So really working on something like Locke and Key was like a dream come true for me. There's this great sequence we do in the show where we're trapped in these caves and water's flooding, and I got to go and see this cool set and go, oh my God, I'm in the Goonies. Like I'm in these movies I used to watch. Like this is a scene that I would watch and go, oh, I wish I was there shooting that. So this show is very much like that. But horror too, you're right. You get to see how the sausage is made. You know, I did a movie where I got literally crucified on the side of a barn.
Oh, wow.
And like that was like super fun to do. Like you know, and I never would have expected that. I do enjoy comedy. I like improvising. But again, like, you know, I kind of love like there's something fun in everything. Drama's fun because, you know, you get to do scenes where you get mad and lose your shit or, you know, break down crying, and it's sometimes it can be a pain to get there, but once you're in that place and you do it and you hear cut, you know, you nailed it. It's such a rewarding feeling. And that comes with all genres, but I would say I really do love those kind of big mythology, fantasy kind of things like Locke and Key or Stranger Things or Lost. Those are the big things with the big mysteries. Those are the things that really always intrigued me as a kid.
Right. So now I'm curious, just indulge me for a second. How hard or easy is it to make yourself like actually like a blubbering mess? You know, like a hysterical cry, like to get there? Is that like an actual difficult thing to do? It takes practice, or?
It's so funny. For the longest time, if I was home alone, and I don't mean this in any kind of depressed anxiety way, I could look in the mirror and within seconds I could have tears in my eyes. I'm like, oh my God, I'll nail it. But then when I'm on set and the cameras are rolling and the crew is exhausted and you've been there for 14 hours and they're like, all right. And then so they're going to talk and then you're going to burst into tears and you're like, oh, okay, yeah. All right, let's do it. And you just can't do it. So it's sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. And like, it's for me, I've always kind of struggled to make myself like cry. But you know, one of the leads in Locke and Key, this amazing actress named Amelia Jones, who plays one of the members of the family. We had to do this scene where she has to come in and it's got to be a joke. We're making a fake horror movie in the show, and she's got to be like kind of a bad actress and like blah, blah, blah. And then something happens and she's actually got to break down, like kind of crying. And I remember saying to myself, I was like, that's brutal, because before the take, you have to get yourself to a place where you're almost crying and then be happy and fake for the first 45 seconds of the take and then burst into tears. And she killed it every time. And I don't think I could do that. I just don't see. Maybe I could. I just don't see it now. And I would ask her, and she's like, "Oh, I just, I pictured this. I just did that in my head." I'm like, "You're a rocket scientist to me. Like that's just genius." And there's many actors that can do it. It's I can do an emotional scene if the scene starts emotional. If you've got to be normal for like 2 minutes and then cry, it's tricky for me. I'd love to really try to get there. I haven't had to do it yet, but yeah, it'd be interesting. It can be tough. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always one of those things you think about that. So you're saying like some people will like bring themselves to almost tears before they start filming. So you're kind of like already on that verge. Like it's.
Yeah, like they'll get themselves to where they're almost like, I guess they're about to explode, and they can pretend for about a minute and then let those emotions out. It's almost like opening up the floodgates, right? But for me, it's almost like it's coming and it's coming now. So that's it. It's going to come now, or it's going to come and it's going to look kind of fake. I'm sure there is a secret sauce that I could figure out, but it still evades me right now.
Yeah. What's the like a dream? Is it, you said your mom's in theater, your dad's been in a bunch of movies. Like if I gave you the magic wand and I said, okay, here you go, Jesse, you can pick where you're going to go and who you work with in the movies. Like what's kind of like the ideal path that like you'd want to take?
Well, I'll kind of give you two. I'll say like the realistic one, and then the crazy fantasy. Honestly, if I'm working on shows like Locke Key on a consistent level for the rest of my life, and I'm making my rent and a little extra to have some fun with friends, I'm happy. I don't need to be the biggest celebrity in the world. I'm totally cool with that. If I'm making something quality that's really fun and I don't have to worry about work, then I'm a happy person. I don't need to win the Oscar, and also I'm not sure I'm at that level. So it's like, I'm fine with that. Obviously, if we want to go crazy, yeah, I'd love to be, you talk about like who's the biggest star in the world right now. When you think of amazing actors like Saoirse Ronan or, big movie stars like Will Smith, that would be really, really cool. I just don't know if I'm really the right mold for that kind of thing. But if I guess I had a magic wand, maybe I'd make it happen for myself and hope that I would, remember all my humility and try to help out people that are maybe more talented that didn't get the magic wand. But yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty simple guy. I'd just love to have consistent work and, especially on a television show format. I really like the camaraderie you build with the cast. So yeah, those are the two. Like one's the kind of basic one, and yeah, the other one I've got all the Oscars and I can make my own movies and all that fun stuff.
Working with Leo and Christopher Nolan and all
exactly.
Yeah. I'm curious. When you're trying to get a part, I'm wondering now in this new kind of world that we live in with content creators on YouTube and influencers on Instagram and Twitter and all those different things. Do those things come into account when you're looking for work? Like, are producers and writers like scrolling through your Twitter and seeing if you're making jokes or like building a following and all those types of things? Like, does that come into play when you or other actors are trying to land a gig?
I definitely think it can. I do again think it's producer or project specific. I genuinely believe, like you listed someone like Christopher Nolan. I mean, obviously he's such one of the greatest directors around, but I don't think somebody like him cares. I don't think if it's between me and a guy with 10 million Twitter followers, that's going to be the deciding factor for him. I actually think it's more of a thing on smaller projects that are not low budget, but are kind of in the middle range where they want that extra thing to kind of push them over the edge. I do know a friend of mine lost out on a role because someone else had more Instagram followers than her. Or that was the reason she was given. Yeah. But again, it's all very political. So it does play a factor in some projects. I wouldn't say it's the most consistent thing, though. I think for the most part, people want the best person they want for the job. But I'll tell you this, it definitely doesn't hurt to have a huge following.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a pressure as an actor, like you said, but you're not always working, that trying to build, working as like a more of a branding exercise for yourself to build these followings? Like, do you feel a pressure for yourself to try to, I don't know if you have a podcast or a YouTube channel or anything like that. But in the back of your mind, is that ever sitting there? Like you're like, I really should, and try to build myself up and maybe make some money that way, or expand my reach and my kind of repertoire.
It's funny, actually. I was thinking about my friend, a good friend of mine, Erica, and I. We were talking about maybe doing a podcast. Problem is, we just weren't sure what we were going to talk about. So once we crack that code, maybe. It is something I've thought about, and I think again, there's some laziness and self-deprecation in here. But I've kind of thought to myself, I was like, well, you're not going to be the guy with 40 million followers, based on just what you were given. And maybe I'm being way too hard on myself, but I was like, just take fun pictures that you like and maybe make a couple people laugh and post those. But I do think it's something that I need to give more thought to. And I think people should too, because you are creating a base and anything can help you. And, some people like shade, Instagram models and people like that. And I'm like, hey man, if they like what they're doing and they're making a living, do it. I guess I don't yet have the confidence or the, idea of what my thing is, of what my kind of, besides making a couple self-deprecating jokes or taking a goofy photo, I'm like, I don't really know what the theme of my page is.
Right.
But it's definitely something that I've thought about and something that I think I should look into at some point.
Yeah. Well, you're communicate well, very articulate. I laugh that it's, don't know what to talk about. It's like, the key is like, I never know what I'm going to talk about either. I just like listen to people, and then
you ask the right questions. Yeah.
And then I try to like, just, I always like to think of it as just having a little conversation with somebody, like as if we were just out for a beer or grabbing coffee. And I'm like, Jesse, man, tell me about your life. What's going on? What's happening? And trying to get it at that angle and give a more humanistic view instead of those like quick punchlines that you kind of get on like ET Canada or something, right. And like that rehearsed kind of script.
Yeah,
like,
it's talking better.
Yeah,
right. Exactly. I would work on this till I died. Yeah. No, for sure. 100. And that's the thing is that, I've never had a problem not having anything to say. So I'm sure once I finally break through that little barrier, Eric and I will lay something down. I'll be like, okay, this could happen. So again, it's probably a bit of laziness too, but it's going to happen. We're going to get to it.
So, I mean, other than acting, is there other things that you're very passionate about? Things that you love to do, explore, learn about, anything like that?
Well, I am, it is a lot of creative stuff. I do, it's just a world I love to swim in, like whether it's movie or television. So I enjoy writing as well. I'm not a great writer, but I've always really enjoyed writing. I also like again, I love conversing with people, having well-mannered debates, so that kind of thing, but I am a creator. I love reading, it's not been, again, what I'm about to say, this is hardly the worst thing in the world in any way, but it's been a tough couple weeks to be a major Harry Potter fan. And I grew up as a major Harry Potter fan. And it's been I swear to God, this room behind me is full of Harry Potter memorabilia. Like it was defined my childhood. So it's been a rough couple weeks for that, kind of trying to sort through what's there for that, what's the cutoff for that. But that was like a huge passion of mine growing up. Like I was obsessed with those books, and I like went to the midnight, releases, and I went to all the movies, and I still love that world. And it's like, what are you left with now? Because obviously I very much disagree with the things being said by J.K. Rowling, but I'm like, I think it's bigger than her now in my mind. It's like her story, she's given it to the world. So I do think there is still room for us to like that world and those stories while kind of distancing from point of views that we don't really agree with.
Yeah, that's interesting. I last week, or I guess it was just the weekend, I went for coffee with someone who is a huge Harry Potter fan, but she's also like very involved in the LGBT community, kind of speaking out about it. And we went for coffee because she had to like take a break from social media because it was so hard on her, and she was just like looking for advice. So I can imagine, for tons of people, that's it brings up a good question though, and it's kind of a deep one. But like separating the artist from the art, do you think that's possible? I've always struggled with that kind of dilemma. And like you said, when it comes to J.K. Rowling, who
Yeah.
gave us this world, but also she was the creator. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you think it's possible to be able to separate the two and not have it be problematic?
Well, yeah, again, I think it is sort of a case by case basis. And just by saying that, I'm already aware that I'm sure there's unconscious bias that I'm throwing myself into. Like I used to say about somebody like Kevin Spacey. It's like, can I still watch his movies and enjoy what he did? Maybe. Do I think he should be able to make more? No. That's sort of where I'm like, whatever's out there is out there. But would I be cool with him working more? I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I think that's, obviously somebody like Harvey Weinstein's a total write-off. Like, talk about the lowest of the low. But, I still find, I'll watch a movie, I'm like, oh, crap, produced by Harvey Weinstein. And I'm like, well, I love this movie. Like, so it's tough, it's tough. So I guess my rule, and again, this is just me, and I'm wrong way more than I'm right, is, I think if something's out there and it's been released and it's been out in the world for long and you still can watch it and enjoy it, I don't think you should feel guilty about that. But I think that, a lot of these people shouldn't get to do more.
Right.
But again, that's just me.
Yeah, no, I get that. And it's funny you bring up Kevin Spacey, because I loved Kevin Spacey and movies. Like when watching House of Cards, like I loved that show, and American Beauty, and when that happened, yeah, I had that exact same. I'm like, is it okay? Or like comedians, when you think of Louis C.K. or more recently Chris D'Elia, like,
or really bad Bill Cosby, like
Bill Cosby,
all these people. Yeah.
Is it still okay to go back? I don't know, and I think it is very subjective. And I always, I have deep conversations like this with people, whether it's on race or on all these things. And I think, I always, like you said, that bias that I always come through it and the lens of looking at it as a white, straight white male.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so, yeah, my opinion's probably wrong half the time on a lot of things, just because I don't have the experience and I'm not the person who's being attacked on anything. And
right. I go through the same thing where I'm like, it's, I'm not the one to be offended. So it's like, I could say, like, I believe this comment's offensive and I would never say it and I don't agree with it, but it's not, it's not directed at me. And I think, again, where do we draw the line? Those guys that we mentioned, what they did was very predatory. Where someone like J.K. Rowling, it's more frustratingly ignorant to me. It's like, I think that this is someone who's been very evidently capable of a lot of empathy and affection, and is donated to charities and stuff. It's like, how can you be so ignorant in this area? Like, do you not see this? And obviously she's had experiences that I don't wish on anyone, and it's maybe kind of brought her to where she is today. But that to me is more sad, because somebody, again, when you talk about the Harvey Weinsteins or people like that, it's like, well, you're just, there's nothing to say to you, really.
Yeah,
you're kind of the lowest of the low. But J.K. Rowling, you're like, how do you have this blind spot? Like, so it's just, I think it's different cases, but I can still appreciate the work, I guess. But I do think about it and I struggle with it.
Do you, I know we just like talked about this, but when, I think when we talk about like the Black Lives Matter movement and people showing solidarity and everything like that, just as an example, but, as an actor, as someone who's recognizable, who has, a platform, do you feel, a responsibility to speak up for injustices, whether that's through interviews or social media, or is it something you're like, get a little nervous because you're like, I don't want to say the wrong thing and, get quote unquote canceled or
right.
in trouble or anything, right? It's a very touchy ground, but a lot of people kind of have an expectation people with a larger platform speak out about it.
Yeah.
How does
and yeah, and especially me coming from a place of privilege, right? I do feel responsibility is a good word for it, but it's also like, I believe, it's I guess my morals or my opinion that it's just right to speak up about this stuff and just show your full-fledged support to it. Yeah, there's definitely nervousness about, saying the wrong thing. I remember the day that everyone was posting the black squares on Instagram, and then, that was this really great thing to do, like literally at the beginning of the day, and then like a couple hours later, people were like, actually, this is not helping at all. It's actually maybe doing more harm than good. And I was just trying to play catch up. And then I said, maybe I'll just sit back and read and listen and get informed. And then, when I did that, I was like, I feel really guilty being silent here. I really want to speak up and show my support. But, again, that, small battle in my head is so secondary to what people are actually going through, that I was like, what, this is so not about me at all. Again, I'm a very come from a place of privilege. So it's like, put out your support in any way you can. And if you say the wrong thing a little bit, but your intentions are good, most people will see that and you can correct yourself. And I've been lucky so far in that, I'm just kind of following the lead of people that I think are so much more well-informed than I am. And showing my support that way. And, my actions are going to speak louder than my words, but I hope to continue to be vocal in showing my support. I think a lot of things that are going on are it's unfortunate that things happen that caused it, but I'm glad the conversations are being had. I think it's really good. And I'm hopeful that we're going to see some lasting change. The industry, I think, is making, in the arts industry, the acting world, I think is really starting to make the right moves. And, there are people out there that complain that the pendulum is swinging too much in the other direction. That's a price I'm willing to pay. It's not even a price to me. It's, yeah, let's do it. Let's overcorrect.
Mm-hmm.
And then instead of swinging back the other way, we'll swing into a middle ground and we'll be in a fair, diverse place. But if we have to really push it right now, I think that's a great thing. And I'm in full support of that.
Yeah, it was kind of a perfect storm with, everyone being cooped up in COVID and then having the blow up and then all the subsequent things that have happened afterwards that have kind of kept adding fuel to the fire. I know me working in the media industry, lots of things are changing, and you see a lot of shows now, especially voice actors, which is quite controversial to one side at least, that people like Alison Brie and she was, I can't remember her name, but she was in Big Mouth. They're stepping down from
Jenny Marbles, I believe, right? Jenny Marbles.
Well, she was the YouTuber who.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't
remember her name, but anyways, people are white women or white men are stepping down from even voice acting roles for representation in media and in film. And it's something I've definitely been learning. Why it's important.
And my father's a voice director. So I get that world a little bit. And my opinion, and I'll once I get this whole thought out, I think people understand. My opinion has always been, in voice, you can kind of be whatever you want. Like, to me, it should be, the voice is the place where you should be allowed to play different cultures and all that fun stuff. Having said that, I think what's happening now is good and needs to happen, because there just isn't the door isn't open for these diverse, very talented actors to get in. So I do think what's going on now is necessary, because it's like you give those people the chance to come in and show how talented they are. And then at some point you can have people playing everybody, but there'll be a diverse collection of voice actors doing it. Like, I thought Mike Henry, who played Quagmire on Quagmire Cleveland on Family Guy, was great. He was awesome. But I totally agree with his decision, because he's like, let's give someone the chance to do this, and then we'll see how talented they are, and then maybe a black actor can play a white guy, and and then we can all go back to everyone playing everybody. But right now, I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. Opening the door and like letting people in. Listen, man, I really appreciate you joining me. Thank you so much. I know it's been
thanks for having me.
It's been a weird time, especially for actors, as I'm beginning to learn the past couple of interviews. If people want to follow you on social media, find some of your work, where can they search that? Yeah.
So I'm on Twitter and Instagram right now. As I said, I don't really have my identity down yet, but there's some fun stuff on there. So at Twitter, I'm at Jesse115115. I'm a big Survivor fan, so you'll see a lot of hot takes on Survivor on there. And then on Instagram, I'm Jesse JD Camacho. And there's some fun Locke and Key behind the stuff there, and pictures of me, doing stupid stuff with my double chin and stuff. So you'll have some. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. So and definitely check out Locke and Key on Netflix.
Yes,
right
please.
now, season 1's out, and as we heard here first, season 2 might be coming sooner rather than later. Hopefully, once everything starts to open up.
Yes.
Jesse Camacho, my friend, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Take care.
And thanks for having me. Let's do it again soon.
You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland.